Coatbridge is a town in North Lanarkshire, Scotland, situated approximately 9 miles east of Glasgow in the heart of the Central Belt. For much of the 19th century, it was one of the most intensely industrial places in the world, known as the Iron Burg, a town built on blast furnaces and coal mines, and the labour of tens of thousands of workers who had come from across Scotland and Ireland to find a wage. At its peak, Coatbridge had more blast furnaces operating within its boundaries than any other town in Scotland. The sky above it glowed at night. The ground beneath it was riddled with old mine workings. The Monkland Canal ran through the middle of it, built to carry coal to Glasgow before the railways came. By the 1950s, the heavy industries that had defined Coatbridge for a century were in steep decline. The ironworks were closing, the demand for coal was falling, and the community was adjusting to a world in which its reason for existing had largely passed. But the people remained. The streets of terraced houses and tenements remained. The close-knit community, shaped by generations of shared labour and shared hardship, remained. Coatbridge in the 1950s was a tight, proud working-class town, where people knew their neighbours and children played outside and families looked out for one another. Moira McCall Anderson was born in approximately March 1946 in Coatbridge. She was the middle of 3 daughters born to Andrew Anderson and his wife. Her father was a storeman in one of Coatbridge's ironworks, a working man in a working town. Her mother had come originally from Fife. Moira had an older sister named Janet and a younger sister named Marjorie. The family lived at 71 Eglinton Street in the Cliftonville area of Coatbridge. Moira was 11 years old in February 1957, just 6 weeks away from her 12th birthday. She was a slight, pretty girl with fair hair and blue eyes. She was known to everyone who knew her as a tomboy. She loved swimming, playing marbles, and playing pranks on the people she loved. Her father Andrew described her to reporters as a high-spirited little girl who never deliberately annoyed anyone. He said you could set the clock by her. She was always home when she was supposed to be. He said she had been well drilled, as had all his daughters, not to speak to strangers. She was looking forward to starting high school. She had a plan for her future. She wanted to become a missionary and travel to Africa. She was a child who knew exactly where she was going. Saturday, the 23rd of February 1957 was one of the worst days in living memory in Coatbridge. A blizzard had descended on the town, the most severe snowstorm the area had experienced in years. Streets were being buried under heavy drifts. Most vehicles had come off the road entirely. The town was being shut down by the weather. Moira's maternal grandmother was extremely ill at her home a few streets away. Moira's Uncle Jim, who was caring for the ailing woman, needed lard to cook fish for his mother's dinner. He estimated that Moira could get to the local co-op on Laird Street and back before it closed. It was a short walk, less than 10 minutes from the grandmother's house. He sent Moira out into the blizzard to fetch it. When Moira arrived at the co-op, it was closed. Co-op staff would later claim they had not closed early that day because of the storm. Years later, this claim was confirmed to be untrue. The shop had in fact shut early because of the weather. Moira had walked through the blizzard for nothing. Rather than return to her grandmother's house, she was seen by witnesses waiting at a bus stop. She was due to meet her cousins to go to the 5 o'clock film show at the Regal Cinema in the town centre. She waited. She boarded a Baxter's bus on Alexander Street, near her home on Eglinton Street at around 5:15 in the afternoon. several witnesses saw her get on. It was one of the very few vehicles still moving in the town that afternoon because of the severity of the storm. The bus was being driven by Alexander Gartshaw. Moira Anderson was never seen again by any member of her family. When she did not come home, the community of Coatbridge came together with a speed and solidarity that said everything about the kind of town it was. A group of approximately 80 corporation cleansing workers who had been on strike suspended their industrial action and went directly to Coatbridge Police Headquarters to volunteer their services in the search for Moira. Scores of people telephoned the police with tips and sightings, sending detectives to Shettleston, Gourock, and as far as Doncaster. Every lead was followed. None of them led to Moira. Police told reporters they had no reason to suspect foul play. Months passed before the BBC was asked to broadcast Moira's photograph on television, and her family had to fight to make that happen. In the absence of any official answer, cruel rumors began circulating in the town that Moira had been a difficult child and had run off to London. Her family rejected this with absolute certainty. Moira had been excited about her 12th birthday. She'd been looking forward to high school. She had been due to meet her cousins that very afternoon. She had not run away. What her family did not know, what nobody in Coatbridge knew, was what kind of man had been driving the bus she had boarded on that February afternoon. Alexander Gartshaw was in his mid-30s in 1957. He drove a bus for the local firm Baxter's. He was known to police as a flasher, a man who had exposed himself to young girls in local parks. 1 month before Moira disappeared, Gartshaw had been arrested and charged with raping a 17-year-old babysitter. He was out on bail on the afternoon he drove Moira Anderson for the last time. In April 1957, by which time Moira had already been missing for several months, he was convicted of that rape at Airdrie Sheriff Court and sentenced to 18 months in prison. Police at the time never questioned Gartshaw in connection with Moira's disappearance. Despite the fact that he was the last known person to see her alive, despite the fact that he was out on bail for a serious sexual offense at the time she boarded his bus, his name was apparently never placed at the center of the investigation into her disappearance. He served his sentence and went back to his life. 2 years after Moira vanished, Gartshaw approached one of her sisters and asked for her help with a car he was working on. He sexually assaulted her. She broke free and ran. 2 policewomen came to her school to speak to her about the incident. No further action was taken. Gartshaw had a daughter named Sandra, born in 1949, a year before Moira, who had grown up knowing that her father was a dangerous and predatory man. Sandra Brown, as she became after her marriage, built a career as a primary school deputy head teacher and senior lecturer. She received a master's in education from the Open University. She was a woman of intelligence and enormous moral courage. And for decades she carried the weight of what she believed her father had done to the missing girl from Eglinton Street. In 1992, following a conversation with Gartshaw that convinced her beyond any remaining doubt of his involvement, Sandra approached the authorities. Gartshaw was interviewed in Leeds, where he had relocated with a second family on suspicion of murder and on charges relating to the sexual abuse of Sandra's cousins. The Procurator Fiscal dropped the charges and declined to bring Gartshaw to Scotland for further questioning. Sandra wrote a book. She called it Where There Is Evil. Published by Pan Macmillan, it sold over 100,000 copies internationally. She used the proceeds to establish the Moira Anderson Foundation, an organization that provides counseling and legal support to victims of child sexual abuse. She was awarded the OBE for services to child protection in Scotland. One detail from the confrontation she and a Daily Record reporter had staged with Gartshaw in Leeds in 1993 was particularly telling. They challenged him to place his hands on a Bible and deny any involvement in Moira's disappearance. He could not do it. During the conversation, Gartshaw mentioned that his father would never forgive him about Moira Anderson, and that he was convinced he was responsible. In 1999, a former friend and fellow child abuser told police that Gartshaw had admitted to him that he was responsible for Moira's murder. Police Scotland's Cold Case Unit took on the case formally in 2013. The exhumation of a grave in Old Monkland Cemetery, belonging to a friend of Gartshaw's named Sinclair Upton, who had died within days of Moira's disappearance, was carried out that year. Sandra believed her father had used the open grave as a cover to place Moira's body inside it. Moira's remains were not there. The press attention that followed the exhumation brought two new witnesses forward. The first said that in the summer of 1956, a full year before Moira disappeared, Gartshaw had exposed himself to both her and Moira in a local park, and had called Moira specifically by name during the incident. The second witness said that on the afternoon of 23 February 1957, near a bus terminus in the town, he had seen a man dragging a young girl by the arms. He identified the man as Gartshaw. He identified the girl as resembling Moira. Police confirmed that both witnesses had credible reasons for not coming forward in 1957. In 2014, the Scottish Crown Office issued a statement of historic significance. It said that had Alexander Gartshaw still been alive, he would have been indicted for the abduction and murder of Moira Anderson. Legal experts describe this statement as without precedent in the history of the Scottish legal system. Gartshaw had died in 2006. He was never charged. He never stood in a courtroom. He never answered for what he did. In 2017, a stretch of the Monklands Canal was searched by forensic experts, prompted by a tip that had originally been reported to police in 1957 from a man who had seen someone matching Gartshaw's description walking along the canal bank with a heavy sack. The tip had been dismissed at the time as a sighting of a man stealing coal, which was common in the area. The canal search found nothing. Forensic soil scientist Professor Lorna Dawson was brought in by police to identify new potential locations for Moira's remains. She highlighted the Witchwood area of Coatbridge as worthy of exploration. Moira's sisters, Janet and Marjorie, believe their sister may be hidden in a graveyard somewhere in Lanarkshire. The investigation remains live. Police Scotland's Cold Case Unit has not closed the file. Sandra Brown, who has spent more than 30 years fighting for Moira and for the wider cause of child protection in Scotland, has said that finding Moira, so that her family can lay her to rest in the manner she deserves, is what matters most now. Hello everyone, thank you for listening, and drop any feedback below. I would love to hear your thoughts and hope to see you again right here on Cold Case UK.